Here are my top picks for orchestral strings sample libraries. They are my trusty tools that I keep getting back to when composing production music tracks, custom pitches, albums, and passion projects. Orchestral music production is hard. No matter if you're an aspiring composer or a seasoned music veteran, if you want to write convincing orchestral music, you need high quality sounds. I already broke down the best string sample libraries specifically for beginners in a tier list video here. Now I'll show you what strings libraries I find myself using over and over again in everyday life. We look at the best strings all-rounders, solo libraries, thematic strings that create atmospheres, strings that you can use out of the box for modern hybrid orchestral music, and I'll tell you my strings library when I need things to be romantic and emotional.
Ooh.
For general strings, bread and butter workhorses that I use in many different contexts and that save my life every day, I have two picks. Number one is Cinematic Studio Strings, a favorite among many composers for almost a decade and a trusty workhorse in many situations. I love CSS for two reasons. Reason one, it's consistency. The violins, violas, cellos, and double basses in Cinematic Studio Strings sound like one consistent section. It's butter smooth. The articulations connect extremely well, transitioning seamlessly between various types of shorts, trills, marcados, and legatos. And with the marcado, you can even have shorts and longs mixed, and it's very consistent and nice. This consistency allows me to focus on composing with my ideas instead of composing for the sample library. Reason two is the CSS legato. Cinematic Studio Strings boasts a gorgeous, silky and fluent legato that's perfect for melody writing, period. Despite not being the newest sample library, Cinematic Studio Strings arguably still boasts the best legato available, and it never disappoints me. Keep two things in mind when you consider Cinematic Studio Strings as your general bread and butter strings library. You'll find yourself nudging MIDI notes every now and then because it has multiple legato speeds. This feature is helpful as it can easily handle both slow and fast passages like that, all the way up to fast runs. However, as a downside, it requires you to spend some time with its workflow. If all MIDI notes were quantized here, it wouldn't be in time. And even if I nudged some notes to the right timing, others that have like the fast or the slow legato and not the medium legato would still be out of time. So I have to sometimes optimize each note individually. Another aspect about CSS is that it has a sort of romantic, sort of like mellow sound, and also that it's a medium section size. It's not over the top, huge symphonic. So while Cinematic Studio Strings is a no-brainer for me in a broad range of orchestral projects that I do, when I need to scale things up, I turn to my second bread and butter strings library, which is Pacific Ensemble Strings. CSS is studio strings. They sound closer and drier. Compare this, CSS without any processing or reverb straight out of the box. To Pacific. Again, no processing, straight out of the box. Pacific nicely complements those aspects that CSS might not be the best choice for. I turn to Pacific when I need a lush symphonic string section for great sounding results with little work. Pacific is easier to program than CSS because you can set the negative track delay once and have all notes play on the grid and in time. This wouldn't work in CSS. Pacific offers a ton of dynamic layers for natural sounding expressive melodies, chord textures, and sustains. You can cycle through the entire mod drill range and barely hear any crossfading. It has that gorgeous ambient hall sound that kicks even more when I add some reverb, but also has it baked in the sample, which Cinematic Studio Strings doesn't have to that extent. Are you curious which strings library would be the best general bread and butter library for you, for your projects? Hundreds of composers already use the same strings library as you in the Become a Pro Composer Discord server. We got your back with workflow tips for your favorite libraries or recommendations on which strings library fits best to you. Click the link in the description. It's free. Best case scenario, you connect and forge meaningful connections. Psst, we also have very popular composer games. Worst case, you leave again with 2 clicks, but I'll think you stay. Moving on to solo strings. I rely on 3 sample libraries consistently. One is Cinematic Studio Solo Strings, for the same reasons like its big Ensemble Brothers CSS. It's very consistent, has great legato, and you can use it very easily to add a solo layer on top of your CSS ensembles by simply pasting over the MIDI. Because they're so consistently programmed, you don't need to change the MIDI at all. This is simply copy-pasted from the CSS ensemble patch and everything is in time, the modulation works nicely and it sounds good. However, when I need to record a solo strings line, perhaps a violin or a cello, and phrase it exactly the way I want with the vibrato and everything, I often opt for something else. Sample modeling solo strings, together with this. My MIDI breath and gesturing controller. Sample modeling solo strings are modeled string. Like other sample libraries, they have a base set of sampled recordings, but they use algorithms to shape and control the sound very flexibly. With sample modeling solo strings, I can control the vibrato much more flexibly than with Cinematic Studio solo strings, especially when using the hand gestures with my breath and bite controller too. This device picks up the movements that I make with my arm from my body movement and translates them into vibrato. Together with the breath, I can nicely control the melody, how it like swells or goes quiet, and really shape a melody that I want to play. The downside is that it lacks a bit in tone and character, especially when exposed or in isolation. However, in the context of a track, it usually fits quite well, and I often use it. An honorable mention for solo strings goes to solos of the C, violin, A, and B by Performance Samples. I use them all the time. These are 2 simple, small, and affordable solo violins that sound breathtakingly gorgeous. Violin A uses bowed legato with defined transitions. And violin B uses slurred legato, pretty over the top and emotional, where the player glides from one note to the other with the finger. I use violin B whenever I want an intimate, dramatic effect. There are also high-quality free and budget strings libraries available. While these libraries often have some sort of limitations in range, articulation, or microphone positions, they can be the perfect starting point that you need to create high-quality orchestral music without breaking the bank. Performance Samples has super high-quality freebie demo patches that you should absolutely check out. I made an entire video about the Pacific Ensemble Strings freebie. They have even more available on the website. Spitfire Audio also offers several nice-sounding strings instruments in their original family that each are priced at $29 US. Both the epic strings and the intimate strings are absolutely worth it for the price. Finally, in my opinion, the best deal for entry-level strings libraries is Araya Lite by Audio Imperia. For under $100 US, you get high-quality string ensembles with legato for all sections, individual section control, and 2 microphone mixes. If you want, you can then upgrade to the full version of Araya for more options for customization and more articulations, and you only pay the difference. Pretty good deal. Audio Imperia Araya Full is my favorite pick when writing orchestral music that needs a modern sound, one that bites through a mix or a hybrid orchestral composition with synth or sound design elements mixed together with the orchestra. Araya has a super modern cinematic sound that has, of course, all the articulations that you would expect from a flagship strings library. With Audio Imperia's Pyramid engine, it's super easy to work with, and the modern mix preset allows me to immediately get going and achieve that characteristic hybrid orchestral sound. And if you want it to sound more realistic, you can switch to the classic mix with the push of one button. Alternatively, I would probably choose specific ensemble strings and apply some processing to give it a bit more bite in a hybrid orchestral track. If you only have an all-in-one orchestra, by the way, the strings in Audio Imperia Nucleus are also more than capable of a super fat modern orchestral sound, as I think they share some of the sample pool with Araya. Again, no processing, no external reverb. Now let's explore my preferred thematic strings libraries, those that instantly add flavor or atmosphere when I need it, before then getting ultra emotional in the last category. First on the list for thematic strings libraries is Afladis by Stress of Sampling. Afladis is inspired by Golden Age Hollywood film scores and includes a ton of different strings ensembles in really wild styles and combinations. It covers everything from classical to modern contemporary film scores, both minimalist ensembles and large ensembles. And of course it has all the standard sections and articulations that you would expect from a flagship strings library. Afladis has experimental patches, like warriors shouting with timpanis and double basses, an angelic choir over a strings legato, Pharaoh strings, and much more. It's a bit rough around the edges, but it is a playground that I love to explore. It's my secret weapon in my projects when I need a patch that makes my composition more interesting. A notable mention goes to Audio Imperia's Constrictor, which makes it easy to create tension, horror cues, dark, eerie atmospheres, and suspense. It's impressive. Recently I worked on a production music album that required romantic cues, including waltzes, romantic storytelling, dating, all that stuff. And I turned to cinematic studio strings. However, I needed to make it a bit more sweeping and even more over the top. I wanted a melody that grabs the listener by the heartstrings and pulls them in, swirls them around, and leaves them immersed in the emotion that I wanted to capture. And for this, I like to use Performance Sample's Vista. Vista is a legato strings library that provides a larger-than-life romantic chamber sound with slurred legato and an unapologetically cheesy yet absolutely beautiful tone. Compare this again to the cinematic studio strings. It's good, it's really good, especially with the legato. But with Vista, I feel like there's a bit more liveliness to it. While Vista lacks any short articulation, it excels as a specialist library. It's not for every occasion, but when you want to express emotion in sweeping melody lines, it works exceptionally well. An alternative choice for intense melodies with long and flowing notes and legatos is Appassionata by Spitfire Audio. I'd like to hear about your top choices. What's your everyday strings libraries? And how do you add extra spice to your compositions? Post your list in the comments. See you soon.